I want to thank Paulo Branco for giving me the chance to be here side by side with a great writer, Don DeLillo. I'm honored to have translated so many of Don DeLillo's novels, and I'm honored to be here. This is not an interview. I'm not going to...
How many novels?
Difficult question. I would have to count them. Lots of novels. This is not an interview. I'm not going to ask questions. We're just going to talk. But I do want to hear Don DeLillo elaborate on the time of the assassination. That day in 1963, when you were young, you were beginning your career as a writer, and how did you greet the news of the assassination? Because in Underworld, one of the characters says that, and I'm quoting, when JFK was shot, people went inside. We watched TV in dark rooms and talked on the phone with friends and relatives. We were all separate and alone. Is that what you did and how you felt on that weekend?
Everything seemed to stop. And there was a sense, of death that was almost palpable, because the 50s had been a kind of surge forward for America, the post-war surge. And suddenly, we had an extraordinarily photogenic president, enormously popular. And in a matter of seconds, he was dead, and people didn't know quite how to accept it. And I did feel an enormous sense that something serious and important had ended. I had to get on a plane that Monday. The president was killed on Friday. Lee Harvey Oswald was shot by Jack Ruby on Sunday. I had to get on a plane on Monday. And after we took off, I was sitting smoking. One could smoke on a plane then, and I used to smoke. And I was just looking out the window, and the engine caught fire. We were maybe 10 minutes out of the airport, 15 minutes. And there it was. It seemed to be everywhere. And the pilot said, and I remember this, he said, "This plane ain't going nowhere." And then he landed safely. After the Kennedy assassination, everything seemed to bust loose. Riots, further assassination attempts, the war in Vietnam, war protests, serious problems concerning race, and it continued through the 60s and into the 70s. Further assassination attempts, and a cloud of paranoia and drifted over the country. And in part, the paranoia was caused by the fact that so many millions of people did not believe the conclusion of the official Warren Commission, that there was only one gunman. The idea of a conspiracy theory was widespread, and still is, after 50 years. But we know, despite all the analysis, all the investigation, all the supposition, we don't know all that much more than we did on November 22nd, 50 years ago.
And by the way, the three funerals took place on Monday. JFK's funeral, J.D. Tippett's funeral, the funeral of the policeman who Oswald allegedly shot an hour maybe after he allegedly shot JFK, and Oswald's funeral in Fort Worth under the name of William Bobo, if I'm not mistaken, which was another way of, of the authorities, well, not exactly making fun of him, but another turn of ridiculousness in Oswald's life.
You mentioned earlier that I was just beginning my life as a writer. And it never occurred to me for many years that I might write about the Kennedy assassination. It was the most distant thing from my mind in terms of fiction or nonfiction for that matter. Years later, in the 1980s, roughly 20 years after the assassination, I came across a fact in a book I'd been reading about the assassination, which was that Lee Harvey Oswald lived in the Bronx, only 4 or 5 blocks from where I lived at the same time. I was 16, he was 13 or 14. It was widely known that he'd spent a year with his mother in the Bronx when he was a teenager, but I had no idea he'd lived so close to me. And it made me wonder if I'd ever run across him. He used to play hooky and go to the Bronx Zoo. He would miss a day of school and go to the Bronx Zoo, which was nearby. And I often went to the zoo. And I wondered if I had ever seen him there or anywhere else. And it began to occur to me, simply due to this fact, that I might possibly undertake a novel on the subject of the assassination. And of course, I went back to the Bronx and investigated the area. And what I knew, simply, was that at least for that year of the time he was there, he was seeing, and I was seeing and feeling, or seeing and hearing the same things that he was seeing and hearing. We had this, if nothing else, in common. And then it gave me enough confidence to think seriously about doing a novel. And the novel, Libra, does begin in the Bronx when Oswald is a teenager.
There's something I haven't asked you, and I would like to talk to you about it. You mentioned that you stressed the difference between the way in which JFK's death and Lee Harvey Oswald's death were made available to the American public, stressing the social differences between them. After they were dead, those differences remained in the way in which their deaths were made available to the public. And that difference was also apparent in the way their widows were dealt with. Marina Oswald famously said once, "No one asks Jacqueline Kennedy how JFK behaved in bed." Did you try to talk with Marina Oswald or with Jacqueline?
No, If I'd been writing nonfiction, of course I would have done that.
Yeah.
But no, I did not want to do that. I ought to add, Paolo has translated my novel Libra about the assassination, and he knows more about the assassination now than I do. And that's why I'm going to ask him a question, which was, why did it occur to you to go to Dallas in order to do the translation of this novel? And he did go to Dallas.
Yes, I began translating Libra in January, and I felt that I could not do it quickly. I had to take my time. I had to do other translations. I had to stop translating Libra and doing other stuff, and then going back to Libra in order for things to seep down and for me to understand them fully. And then at a certain point I felt that I had to go to Dallas. I had to see the places where Oswald lived. I had to be in Dealey Plaza. I had to, feel the grit of the distances. When you see photos, you have no notions of distance. All photographs distort distances. All filming distorts distances. And so you have to be at a place to understand exactly the spatial relationships between the elements of the space. And so I had to go there. And at a certain moment, on my third or fourth day in Dealey Plaza, I haven't told you this, by the way, I looked around and I felt I have to time the time one takes to run from Elm Street to the picket fence. Because I read somewhere that a policeman, when the president was killed, there were witnesses pointing to the grassy knoll and to the picket fence and saying someone was there and there's smoke over there. And the policeman on a bike dropped the bike and ran up the stairs to the picket fence. And I thought to myself, how long do you take to run up these stairs? And I did it 6 or 7 times. And then I timed my running time, and it was more or less 15 seconds, the average. And so, and I was in shorts, and I was making a fool of myself, obviously. And I hope I haven't been filmed or photographed doing that, but
everything's on film.
Yeah.
You did what I did in the mid-1980s when I was beginning work on the novel in Dallas. Walked all those streets, saw those houses, and I did not run up those stairs. But this isn't the only film shot that day. There are other films and still photographs. And one of the films shot from across the lawn shows dozens of people running up those stairs after the shots were fired. And I'm not sure there's ever been a clear answer as to why they were doing that. They weren't running away. They were running toward something, or they suspected that the shots had come from that direction. And I know when I was there, I went behind what is called the stockade fence on the grassy knoll. It's just a large fence, a stockade fence that was one border of a parking area. And this is where the second gunman, if there was one, could have been standing, and most likely was standing. And I did what he would have done. I just stood there and looked over that fence and saw what a welcome opportunity it would have been for such an individual. And of course, he would have had a driver and a car and would have jumped in. And in the novel, in Libra, this does occur. All fiction, of course.
And 15 seconds is time enough for someone to shoot the president and then disappear.
And to disappear.
Yeah.
There are so many theories. One theory, which I'm not sure we talked about, concerns, I doubt if anyone noticed when we screened the film that there is an umbrella visible just to one side of that sign on Elm Street. You know about this?
Yeah, yeah. The Umbrella Man.
The Umbrella Man, one of the many mysterious figures in the literature of the assassination and in the filmography of the assassination. There was a man with an open umbrella on a bright sunny day. So what was that all about? And for the last 50 years, or nearly so, people have tried to figure out what that was all about. And they could not identify the man. And a theory developed that the Umbrella Man was either giving a signal to a second shooter, or that the umbrella itself was a weapon. And nobody could explain how an umbrella could fire some sort of missile. But that people wrote books about the Umbrella Man, and Errol Morris, the filmmaker, did a 6-minute movie, an interview with an expert on the assassination, who explained that the Umbrella Man was making a protest. He finally came forward to reveal who he was and why he was holding an umbrella. He was making a protest not against President Kennedy, but against President Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, years earlier, when Kennedy was an ally of the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who was seen as a German sympathizer in the years leading up to World War II. So that this was a protest using an umbrella to symbolize the fact that Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, was always photographed with an umbrella. I thought you probably knew this.
Yes. Yeah. When I was there, my host was a man called John Slate, who is the city archivist in Dallas, and he took me to the city archive. I mentioned this to you. And he showed me the JFK murder file. For the first 48 hours, the case was, held by the Dallas police before it went federal, before the FBI took over. And so for the first 48 hours, the Dallas police made a lot of procedures, bureaucratic procedures, and when the FBI took over, the file was shipped to Washington under J. Edgar Hoover's orders, and it was all microfilmed, and then it was sent back to Dallas, and it was stored in a file cabinet, a metal file cabinet, and remained there for a long time. The key was lost. No one knew about it until some 10 years ago, maybe. Not John Slate, but the city archivist, who was a woman, in fact, on the job before him, went to the police headquarters and looking for interesting documents and asked what is inside that file cabinet, and they told him, we don't know, the key's lost. And they opened it with a crowbar, and inside was the JFK murder file. And one of the documents that I held in my hand inside a plastic sleeve, it's not this one, this is just a copy, of course, was the homicide report for JFK. And I'm leading to something that I will ask you later, but this is a fascinating document. This is history itself. This is not a story. When you hold, not this, but the original, the yellow onion skin, thin, with the typewriter print on it. So it's a form with slots to be filled, and the heading is Police Department, Homicide Report, City of Dallas. And then the first slot is last name of person killed, first name and middle name. And it says Kennedy, John F., President of US. And then white male, 47. By the way, he was 46. Residence of person killed, Washington, D.C., White House. Offense, sorry, the printing is very small. Offense as reported, murder. Then the place, etc. And then the details of offense, the way that the police officers, who were named Dorothy and Blessing, by the way, described the crime is the following. The expired was riding in motorcade with wife and Governor John Connolly and his wife. Witnesses heard gunshot and saw the expired slump forward. More shots were heard and the expired fell into his wife's lap. Governor Connolly was also shot at this time. Car in which they were riding was escorted to Parkland Hospital by Dallas police officers. And then, persons arrested. Lee Harvey Oswald. White male, 25. By the way, he was 24. The charge is murder. And when I held this in my hand, I felt that in a sense, I was ready to finish translating Libra. And I'm going to ask you, was there a moment during your research in which you had such an epiphany, had such a, something that you held in your hand, something that you saw, someone that you talked to, that shed some light on this?
I had an anti-epiphany. All the time I was working on this novel, for 3 years roughly, there was a photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a rifle, and it was propped on a makeshift bookshelf over my desk. I finished the novel. This would have been in 1987, probably August or September 1987. I finished the novel, and the photograph fell to my desk off the bookshelf, just like that. It's a true story. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is something that you should talk about, or Paulo Branco, because I think we have to talk about Oliver Stone's JFK, the movie. No?
I don't think so.
No? Because you were the first one, you were the first artist to delve into this mystery. You were a pioneer in a way.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. There may have been other novels.
Not,
I don't know.
I don't think so. Because JFK's Oliver Stone is dated 1991, so it was 3 years after your book was published. And it's a completely different approach. His approach is one of conspiracy, high-level conspiracy. By the way, on the picket fence, on the back of the picket fence in Dili Plaza, there are lots of graffiti, small graffiti made with black markers. And one can read side-by-side statements like, "Rest in peace, JFK," and then on the next picket, "The driver did it." Signed, Libertarian Anne. And then the next picket, "Fuck the Federal Reserve." And in the place on the picket fence where the second shooter may have been,
Yes.
someone wrote, "A professional black ops hit all the way, no doubt. Rogue elements in our government, neck wound plus head kill, shot right from here." And this is the approach Oliver Stone takes in JFK.
Yeah. And I'm surprised the picket fence is still there. Is it, do you think it's the original wooden fence?
It's not
No.
the original, no.
Okay.
It's-
Somebody has the original.
Yeah.
They may not know how much it's worth.
And someone has the seat in which Oswald sat when he was arrested.
In the movie theater.
In the movie theater. It was the owner of the movie theater, immediately after Oswald was arrested, he removed the seat immediately. And then the police came the next day to remove the seat, and they removed another seat because it had been replaced.
When you were in Dallas, did you go to that movie theater? Is it still there?
Yes, it is. I sat on that seat, but it's not the original one, of course. I sat
You
on
sat on that seat. You knew which seat.
Yeah.
I didn't know which seat. I went in too. I didn't even pay. Nobody was there. I just walked in. It's true. But I didn't look for a particular seat.
But you mentioned the precise seat in your novel. Third,
Well, that's it's a piece of information I found somewhere.
Okay. Third row from the back, fifth seat from the right aisle. That's where I sat. I don't know if maybe I sat in the wrong seat.
That could be.
And by the way, the sixth floor window, the southeast window,
Yes.
from which Oswald shot, the owner, the former owner of the building, which is now the museum, but was not a museum until 1989 or 1990, I don't know for sure. After the museum was built, he came publicly saying that he owned the real window. The window that was there was just a fake window. He had replaced it. He owned it, and he put it for sale on eBay. This is not. I didn't invent this. This is real. And
I think the mention of eBay means we're coming to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.